Okay, just pre-warning, I say so way too much. And as you can tell from the title of this video, this is going to be my birth story. So if I get sidetracked, you know why. And I'm gonna do a meet baby video after this, I think. But yeah, I did my 36-week update or 34-week update. Well, I didn't have enough time to do my 37-week update because I did not make it that far. So, what happened the night/day of that my water broke? So I was doing laundry, so going up and down the stairs because this house is two different halves or whatever, like 2 different floors. And I was doing cooking. I did a couple dishes because there wasn't very many left. And what else was I doing? Cooking. I already said cooking. And I let the dog out, and the dog was running around and wouldn't come inside, so I had to chase the dog back inside. And then, so I sat down and relaxed for a little bit because my back was hurting from my weight. And I felt like a gush, and so I started freaking out because I had thought it was my water. I was hoping it wasn't because the fact that she would have been early. And so I went into the bathroom, gushed a whole bunch more, and I was like, I need to call Jacob. So I called him. I tried to call him, and he was at work. He had his ringer off because you're not at where he works. You're not supposed to have your ringer on. So I ended up calling and didn't get a hold of him. Finally, his dad had called me because I was the only one home. Had called me and was like, "Don't forget to stir the stew," and I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Just have Jacob call me." And he didn't even know that I was in labor at that point. So I was like, "Just have Jacob call me." Well, Jacob had checked his phone like 10 minutes later, and he had 28 missed calls from me because I was trying to get a hold of him because I didn't know what to do. I was so freaked out. Ouch. So he calls and he's like, "What's going on? Why are you calling so many times?" And I said, "You need to come home, but don't come quickly because I don't know what's going on." And I explained everything that happened to him, and he talked to his stepmom who lives with us, and she's like, she broke her water. And I was like, crap. And so he's like, "Okay, I'll be there as soon as I can." So he dropped everything at work and he came back with his stepmom and his sister. And after they got here, we scrambled around to grab what little things that we needed, like a towel for the truck, and sweats, and that was all I grabbed. I didn't even have a diaper bag packed or anything. So we got to the hospital, and they made me fill out a bunch of paperwork, because I didn't pre-register or whatever. And so finally I got the paperwork done, and they got me back, and they're like, they got me set up with the monitors, and they tried to get me to explain how everything felt, just so they could, pick out if it really was labor before, testing or checking. 'Cause sometimes I guess you get cramps and whatever during just regular pregnancy with some people. So I was explaining it to them. Finally, they're like, we're gonna swab you and make sure that it's not the fluid from the baby, and we're gonna check to see how dilated you are, if you are dilated. So they swab me, and they're like, okay, yeah, we're gonna send it in. And then she's like, first, I guess I'm gonna check to see how dilated you are. She checked. I was 2 centimeters dilated, and I had gushed more fluid while she was checking, so she didn't even need to send in the swab. I sat in the triage room for like 2 hours. Then they switched me over to the labor room, where I stood up for a while, and the nurse was like, we could get you into like a birthing tub until you're actually getting ready to push. And so I said I did want it, but I must have whispered because I was in so much pain. Because I asked Jake, because I didn't end up getting it, I asked Jacob, I was like, didn't I tell them that I wanted it? And he said, they didn't hear you and neither did I. And I was like, oh, maybe it was just in my head that I said it. And so I finally laid halfway down, cuddled with the bed railing. Jacob felt so bad because he couldn't do anything about my pain. And he's so sweet. He held my hand like a good boyfriend or man would. And he was rubbing my hair and trying to comfort me to the best of his abilities without hurting me. Well, not hurting me, but causing me any more pain than I was already in. After him, like, finally I laid down, and it hurt so bad. And so they're like, we're gonna give you a pain medication, because I was completely against getting epidural, where they stick the needle in your back. And I was against that because I didn't know if there was gonna be a student who did it, because the hospital that I was delivering in, there's always students, and I didn't want to end up like getting paralyzed from the waist down, and I was just really nervous about it. So they're like, we're gonna give you an IV with pain meds in it, just a little tiny bit, and it was fentanyl, I think that's what it's called. And so that did not help. Yeah. And then so there was a really nice nurse named Heather, because I had tried to kick my mom and my brother had came in, and I just wanted it to be me, Jacob, and all the other staff that were required to be there. And so I told him that he was going to have to leave during the labor, and he argued with me, which is the worst thing to do when a woman is in that much pain. They are most likely going to rip your head off and shove it down your throat. And so she was like, I'll be your bodyguard and I'll kick out people that you want me to kick out and everything. And so after sitting there for like an hour in the delivery room after sitting 2 hours in the triage room, I had enough. I was like, there's no way I can do this any longer. Was not up for keep going. And so I was like, I give up. I want an epidural. And so they're like, we're going to check you to make sure you're not 10 centimeters. And, because if you are, we can't give it to you. So they checked me and they're like, yeah, you can't get one because your baby's head is technically almost out. And so I was technically I was on no medication at that point. My fentanyl had already worn off 5 minutes after they had given it to me. So I pushed 6 times and out she came. Yeah, and I am gonna have really bad stories about that kind of stuff, because when she did come out, they had a student who had no idea what the hell they were doing, and they basically played hot potato with my baby. Like, this dude, because, babies are slippery when they come out, but seriously, like, the student, I was pushing her out, and yes, I did tear. So that's another part of the story. So I pushed her out. The student went to go grab her. She slipped out of the student's hands, and thank God my OB was at the bottom of her hands and caught Bella. Otherwise, she would have landed on the floor. And then, they had took her to the examining table to make sure she had all of her limbs, she wasn't missing a body part, all her little bits are there and everything. And then, so they went to go sew me back up, and Jacob was watching between me and the baby, and he was watching them sew me up, and then like a chunk of my skin, like a small piece, but still a chunk nonetheless, had came off while they were sewing me, and they giggled about it apparently, and tried to sew me back up again. And thank God I'm not healing weird or anything, far as I know. Yeah, and they checked Bella and everything was good. So, yeah. I'm going to be doing more videos today, so stay tuned for that kind of stuff. And yeah, so bye guys.